All right, let's talk about something that can be a real headache in history class. The source-based question, or as we all know it, the SBQ. You know that feeling when you're staring at a source and a question and you're just like, where do I even start? Yeah, trust me, you are not the only one. It's super common, but I promise you, by the end of this, you'll have the tools to handle it like a pro. So here's the trick. I want you to stop thinking of it as just another school question. Instead, from now on, you are a history detective. Your mission? To investigate the past. And all those sources, they're your clues. Now, every good detective needs a toolkit, right? Well, yours is a super powerful technique called PEE. It sounds simple, and it is, but it's going to be your best friend for pretty much every SBQ you ever face. So what on earth is PEE? It just stands for point, evidence, and explanation. First, you state your point. That's your main conclusion. Then you find your evidence, the actual proof from the source. And finally, the explanation. This is where you connect that clue to everything else you know about that time in history. Let's really think about this in detective terms. Your point is you walking into the chief's office and saying, I think this is what happened. Your evidence is you slamming the clue, a direct quote, down on the table. And your explanation? That's you connecting all the dots and showing why that clue solves the whole mystery. See? All right, detective, you got your toolkit. Let's put it to the test. Our first case file is the inference question. This is all about learning to read between the lines. Here's our first clue, coming from a hypothetical source A. It tells us about a missionary, Maria Dyer, who started a school for bonded servants. Let's see what the case file is asking us to figure out. So the question is, what can you learn from this source about what missionaries were doing in education? Now, I want you to actually pause and think for a second. What's your first instinct? What's your initial finding here? Okay, you back? Let's start with P for point. A really clear, direct answer is that missionaries were taking the lead in providing education. Simple, short, and right to the point. Next up, E for evidence. Where's our proof? It's right there in the source. It says Maria Dyer set up a school in 1842 for girls. We're literally just pulling the clue directly from the text. And now, the final E, explanation. This is the magic part where you connect it to the bigger picture. We know from our history lessons that the colonial government wasn't really focused on educating local people, especially girls, so this shows that missionaries were stepping in to fill a really important gap. Point, evidence, explanation. Case closed. Let's move on to our second case file, the reliability question. This is a classic detective challenge. Your job isn't just to use a clue, but to decide how much you can actually trust it. It's all about a balanced view. You know, the key to reliability is balance. Sources are almost never 100% good or 100% bad. So let's pretend we have a source about healthcare. On the one hand, it could be reliable if it talks about poor healthcare and high death rates, because that matches what we know about bad sanitation back then. But it might be unreliable if it completely leaves out local efforts, like how Tan Tock Seng funded a hospital. By leaving that out, it makes the government's neglect seem even worse than it was. A top-level answer always shows both sides. Great work. Now for case file number 3, the comparison question. Imagine you have 2 clues, maybe from 2 different witnesses. Your job is to figure out where their stories match up and where they're different. Okay, so let's say we're comparing 2 sources, C and D. The similarity seems obvious, right? Both of them are highlighting the amazing things that local people did to make Singapore better. Maybe source C talks about Lim Boon King in education, and source D talks about Tan Tock Seng in healthcare. But what's the difference? It's the area of their work. One is focused on education, the other on healthcare. Showing you see both the similarity and the difference is what really shows you're thinking deeply. And now, for our final and most challenging case, the judgment question. This is the big one. This is where you have to look at all the evidence from different sources and make a final call. The big question is this. Was the British government more important than local people in developing Singapore? This is not a simple yes or no question. You need to build a solid argument. To make a really good judgment, you have to weigh the evidence. On one hand, you have locals like Tan Tock Seng and Maria Dyer who were on the ground directly helping with healthcare and education. On the other hand, the evidence suggests the government was way more focused on things like trade and profit. So a really strong conclusion you could make, backed up by the sources, is that when it came to Singapore's social development, the locals were actually more important. Excellent work, detective. We've just gone through 4 different types of cases. Before you head out on your own missions, let's just quickly review the final checklist to make sure you're ready for anything. Okay, here are your 4 golden rules. You gotta remember these. Rule number 1, always quote or paraphrase the source. You need proof. Number 2, use the PEE technique every single time. 3, cross-reference. Look at different sources together. And number 4, add your own knowledge to your explanation. So why does all this matter? Because following these rules is what moves you from a basic level 1 answer, which just kind of describes the source, to a level 3 or 4 answer, where you are truly analyzing it. That is the secret to scoring well and showing you really know your stuff. And that's a wrap. Just remember, every single source has a story to tell. Your job as a history detective is to unlock that story using your trusty PE toolkit. Now go out there and start practicing.